Greg, welcome to Drunk Comics.
Happy to be here.
Thank you. Well, first off, do you want to tell me where you're from?
Sure, I'm from Rochester, New York, or more specifically, Irondequoit, and I've been cosplaying for about 5, 6 years, give or take, a month,
All
and I'm
right.
very much
And
into comics, love the movies,
how'd
very
you
much looking
discover
forward.
comics?
Well, I've always kind of watched some of the shows back when I was younger. I saw Lois and Clark on TV, loved that show. Uh, Batman the Animated Series, Superman, Justice League, etc. But I never really owned or like started reading through comics until I was, believe it or not, on my senior trip. We went to New York City, and everyone was just kind of spread out, and somehow I ended up in a Barnes and Noble down there, and I just started looking through books, and right there in the pile was Superman Secret Origin. It was sort of a modern retelling of like the how Superman got his start. It had great art, a good story. I enjoyed it, and I ended up buying it, and I read it on my way back from New York, and that was my first real comic purchase.
Oh, that's such a good origin story for Superman, too. It's probably my second favorite Superman origin book.
Yeah,
So,
what's your favorite?
Birthright.
Oh, I've read that one. Yeah, it's pretty good.
That one's good, but Secret Origins was so good. Oh. So, what comic are we going to talk about today?
Batman Noel.
Very good choice. Very unseasonal, but I feel like that story is timeless.
Yeah. Well, you can always upload this close to the holiday whenever you want.
Oh, I'm gonna upload it sooner than that, but I'm gonna replay it at the holidays. So,
Hey, perfect.
why don't you start by giving us a rundown of the comic?
All right. Well, Batman Noel is basically a sort of retelling of the classic Dickens story, A Christmas Carol, but set in the world of the DC universe. Um, Different characters are given different roles based out of that story. Like Batman, he's sort of a stand-in for Scrooge. You've got Bob, and he's basically like a goon for the Joker, like a low-level henchman. And he ends up on Batman's radar because he was dropping off a package or something for him, and he ends up getting the short end of the stick to start with. That's pretty clear. Like I
Yeah.
said, like all the other characters sort of take roles from the original Dickens story, and I think it's done very well. The art in the story is fantastic, and the writing's great. It's definitely a timeless comic. It's one of my all-time favorites.
It's that art is so gorgeous. I thought it was interesting that you wouldn't immediately think of Batman being Scrooge, but they made it work.
Hmm. All right, so to continue with the story, it follows Batman. He's like after the Joker, so classic kind of DC
Mhm.
comic setup. Um, in the original Christmas Carol, you got Scrooge. He's like old, crotchety, and getting close to his last few years or whatever.
Mhm.
And in this Batman, he's been working himself really hard, and he's starting to come down with like pneumonia. So he's got bad cough, and he's not taking like anyone's advice. Like Alfred tells him to rest, he won't do that, and he actually hallucinates seeing his old partner Jason Todd, who's sort of a stand-in for Marley in this one.
Right. Which is it's nice because some comics don't even remember Jason exists. So it was kind of a nice
Yeah,
callback
he's
to Jason.
yeah, he's definitely come back more in recent years. Really, the
Mhm.
one who's kind of gotten the shaft lately is Tim Drake. He was actually my favorite Robin growing up.
Oh, Tim Drake is great.
Hmm.
He's got a great personality.
Hmm. And he's probably the only Robin who's on par with Batman at a mental level too.
That's true. He's gosh, so smart and yeah, he has gotten the short end of his stick, you're right.
Let's get back to something a little more upbeat.
Happy. So it's gonna change.
Ironic considering the story.
Yeah, but the story has hope and a happy ending.
Hmm.
Spoilers, but I feel like it's, centuries old. Spoilers to anyone who
Yeah.
knows the original story. Okay, so
Hmm.
Jason Todd's visited him
Hmm.
allegedly, depending on.
Yeah, he thinks he just was like seeing him because of like he's getting sick, so he thinks he's just sort of hallucinating him. He goes out to try and find out where Joker is. He's got like this tracker on Bob, like left it on his coat. So you see him, you see little Timmy, and
Yep.
they're in like this crappy little apartment, and Batman's gonna go like spy on them, see if the Joker trying to get in touch with him or something.
Because that's not creepy at all.
Yeah, I get doing surveillance, but then there's just Big Brothering it.
Which was kind of the point. Like
Yeah,
he
Batman's always been kind of a paranoid guy, though in some cases not without merit.
Mm. But the point was that he's lost his moral compass at this point, and
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, something else that the book does really well, it sort of explores bits of Batman's history, like his past, his present, where it could go in the future. I mean, and that's really
Mhm.
illustrated well with the first ghost that ends up visiting him. He ends up meeting up with Catwoman, who's supposed
Mm.
to have some information on the Joker for him, but really she just wants to sort of play around with him. But he's
Yep.
pissed. He's not in the mood for anything. She sort of recounts some like their earlier adventures. You see them in like their old costumes from like the 40s, 50s. She's got like the purple dress with the green cape and all that.
Which is a great costume.
Right.
Not very practical, but oh, I love that look. And Catwoman, I feel like an ex girlfriend is a pretty good ghost from the past, especially when she's a criminal that you're supposed to be arresting.
Yeah. Yeah, eventually they end up fighting, and Batman ends up chasing Catwoman across rooftops, like in the old days, so he gets sort of that feeling of nostalgia. But
Hmm.
but since like he's sick and whatnot, he's not top physical form, and he ends up falling, like he's trying to grab onto the roof, but he misses and he falls into the alley below or whatever. And that's where you meet the second ghost, which in this case, Superman. And I think that was a brilliant pick because you got a guy who's sort of like larger than life. He's bright and colorful. He's got those pretty much everything about him pretty much just says, "Hey, I'm good. I'm nice. I'm pretty much embodies the second ghost from the old stories."
Hope for the present.
Hmm.
Christmas cheer.
Exactly.
And he can take Batman flying.
Yeah, not that he necessarily enjoys that. You imagine what that'd be like, just having him lift you up by the armpits and then just flying you over the city?
When you're sick with pneumonia and hallucinating stuff. Yeah, not so much. Thanks, Superman.
Well, he's trying to get him to sort of see the big picture, to not dwell on certain stuff, to pay more attention to the people that he has in his life right now, people in his city who are trying to make good. Like, there's a nice scene where he's like flying over, he tells him, like, look at your lambs and all that.
Mm.
I sort of half expected him to be all snarking like I can't see them, I don't have supervision, and then for Superman be like I'm making a point, Bruce, don't be difficult or something like that. Just because that's the kind of relationship they have. They have that banter. They go back and forth.
Oh, I love their banter. Their
Yeah.
friendship is one of the better things about the DC universe, I think.
Oh yeah. Absolutely.
And he shows him Bob and little Timmy. The
Yep. That was like the condition to him taking him back to his car to stop and check in on them, see if Joker showed up or whatever. But he doesn't, and Soups is like questioning, like you said before, like his moral compass, the stuff that he's doing, potentially putting a kid in danger.
hmm which really that was my only issue with the story was no matter how far gone Bruce was, would he really do that? But I feel like they had to do it for the story. Like they had to do it to make the story
Right.
make the story.
Right. And Batman was like that for a while in the comics, specifically after the death of Jason Todd. He was a lot more like angry and rough with criminals. He kind of cared less, not only about them, but also about himself, the stuff that he would put himself through. And that's sort of what led to Tim Drake seeking him out and then eventually becoming Robin. He needed to have that sort of light counterbalance to help keep him grounded.
That's a good point. And I guess since this was kind of like not set up at any, or it was kind of
It's outside continuity, but if it were, I would put like somewhere in that time, like after Jason's death, but before Tim becomes Robin, which would also explain why he's so gung ho to catch the Joker. He's got a grudge with him since he's the one that caused Jason's death.
that makes a lot of sense. And like you don't see Tim, so okay, you brought me around to your way of thinking. Well done. Didn't
I
take
have my
long.
methods.
All right, so go on with the story.
All right, well, on to the third ghost. So Superman sort of drops him off at his car, tells him to rest because he did like the whole X-ray vision thing. You can see that he's starting to get pneumonia and whatnot. He ends up flying away, and Batman goes over to his car, tries to unlock it, but then it blows up in his face. I'm kind of surprised that Superman didn't hear that with his
I know
super
he's
hearing and whatnot.
he's just too busy X-raying Batman's lungs, but he's like, no, bomb in the car? What? No.
Well, with how fast he flies and the places he goes, he was probably just like out of range or something. I don't know.
We'll
But
go with or it's possible Superman was a complete hallucination.
it's certainly possible.
The
Lots
story
been
allows
happening in the
that.
story.
Mind blown.
But that leads into the third ghost, which is the representative of death. And there's no better character in Batman's world who represents that than the Joker. So he ends
Yep.
up grabbing him, he drags him off to this nearby cemetery, he buries him alive. It's very reminiscent, sort of, of the old Dickens story where the guy sees like his own grave and he realizes that he has to change and things like that. Except in this point, he actually buries him alive, and while he's unconscious, Bruce sort of gets like these visions or hallucinations or something like that of a potential future, one where Jim Gordon gets arrested for aiding and abetting a dangerous vigilante. You see people who were inspired by Batman going up, beating up, and possibly even killing criminals, saying like all the same stuff that he's been saying in this whole story. And I think that all these visions are enough to shake him out of it. And he ends up crawling out of the grave and he ends up going after him. And that basically leads you back to Bob's apartment. Him and Timmy are kind of holed up there. And he's nervous because he knows that the Joker is probably going to come after him since he knows that he ran into Batman. And wouldn't you know, Joker shows up, sort of crashes his way in, threatens them a bit. Bob tries to fight him off, doesn't work, which of course leads to Batman crashing through the windows at the very last minute to sort of save the day. He
Dun,
convinces
dun,
Bob.
dun. Sorry.
He convinces Bob not to shoot him, and there's you get the nice happy ending. Joker gets arrested, and Bob even gets like a job offer from Wayne Enterprises, and which has all like these benefits. He gets a new window to replace the one that Bruce broke through, and
Of
it's like
course.
he gets like a nice tree and all this stuff. You see Bruce Lair just sort of sleeping in the Batcave with like a thing of soup next to him, so he's finally resting. And the story ends on like a good note. And you see like Tim running around playing with like a cape, like pretending to be Superman. Kind of
Mhm.
ironic considering the story and the fact that he actually ran into Batman.
Yeah. He knows who the real heroes are.
Mhm.
Don't get me wrong, I love Batman, but Superman's a good beacon of hope.
Mhm.
Batman.
Yeah. Hey, no arguments from me.
Yep.
Yeah. Even had like this little like pathetic looking Charlie Brown kind of Christmas tree early on, and he had like
So cute.
he was gonna put like Superman on the tree because he sort of reminded him of Santa since he could do all this stuff that Santa supposedly could. He even talked about putting the bat symbol on it, but of course his father freaked out about that because he just ran into him and got threatened by him.
Yeah. Yeah, I could see why his dad was like, no, no, Batman should not be on our tree. Like, no.
Yeah.
But I think his dad came around. His
Oh yeah,
dad,
definitely.
he was the one telling the story, kind of.
Yeah, it's left kind of vague. You don't know if it's him or if it's his son who's telling the story at some point because he knows like the names of all these characters and whatnot. Talks about Bob, he talks about Scrooge and all that, so you never know who specifically is telling the story, but it's probably one of those two.
Which is interesting because did they find out Batman's real identity or are they just guessing
I'm
details?
not sure. I mean, they only referred to him as Scrooge throughout the
That's
story.
that's true. And then I guess the story is just kind of filling in the details
Pretty
of it,
much. Like you get like the skeleton of Christmas Carol, but set in the DC universe.
which is nice.
hmm Absolutely. It's a really great story. The art is fantastic. You can take any page and just put it up on a wall somewhere.
Exactly. Yeah. I would put so many of those pages up on my wall. They're so pretty.
Yeah,
Like
the only thing that had me kind of got me off was the cover because you got Batman, he's just kind of like that.
I think
Not
the
exactly
cover
what I mean, you
it's
just see Batman angry and in front of the cemetery. That could be like the cover for any Batman related story. But if you wanted something that sort of ties into a Christmas Carol or whatever, I mean, this is just me. I would have done like a stylized bat logo, like with the one that was used in the story, but with like a Christmas wreath around it, sort of like the old oval
right.
sort of thing.
Yeah, the cover was a weird choice. I
Yeah,
don't
not
know.
that that was bad or anything. It was just kind of a weird choice.
It was like the cover was like trying to trick people into buying it. Like, woo, totally not a sappy Christmas story. This is just a big, tough
It's
Batman
rough.
book.
It's edgy.
Buy it. And
Yeah, well,
then we're going to take your feelings for a ride.
well,
Yeah, I think that was just trying to trick people into buying it. Like, yep. Totally, totally not a ooey gooey sappy Christmas story. And then you're going to buy it and you're going to be like, what? This made me feel feelings.
right? I'm feeling things I didn't even think I had.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I mean,
So,
that's basically Batman Noel in a nutshell. A Christmas Carol set in the DC universe.
so is there anything else you want to say about the comic?
Uh, Comic was excellent. I highly recommend it. Anyone who wants like a good story, who loves fantastic visuals, and just an overall Batman fan, I recommend reading this story.
I agree. Well, thank you for being on. Cheers.
Hey, happy to be here.
Awkward cheers. All
Hey,
right.
whatever works. We're on video.
Exactly.